as John Fashanu introduces Losing It. Count to 10 now.
Here we are again, Losing It, where we see sparks fly as sportsmen lose their cool.
Our anger dog Mike Fisher is back to tell us about the passion in sport.
The difference between somebody who's fanatical and somebody who's passionate, it's a very, very, very fine line.
And Leilani and Joe tell us how this raw emotion can easily lead to you losing your cool.
Yeah, I think it's so passionate about the game, or whatever you're doing, just so passionate that you can't help your reactions. It's just natural. And I actually think it adds a bit of spice to the game. I love seeing it.
And in tonight's show, the crazy world of commentary.
I think it's so exciting that I almost made myself sick.
These furry friends aren't so friendly. We meet Bury Football Club's Robbie the Bobby.
I've never seen red in my life until I put the suit on.
And we see all the passion in athletics.
Yeah! Yeah, ball!
No! Sportsmen always want to push themselves to the limits, but sometimes they set their sights way too high. So what's it about sport that makes us push ourselves beyond our natural limits?
It's the addiction to the applause. It's addiction to the positive strokes. It gives their life meaning. Dangerous, destructive. But if it gives their life meaning, I'm going to continue the behavior.
Now, there's one sport that's got quite a reputation for being a little bit violent. When you think of ice skating, you think of beauty and grace. But when ice hockey players put on their skates, it's war!
It's photogenic, it's fast, the uniforms look good, the guys fly about on the ice. It's packed with skill. And then just for good measure, we throw in a bit of salt and pepper by way of the gloves coming off, the odd punch being thrown. There might even be a bit of blood on the ice. And it looks very special, red blood on white ice, believe me.
Yep, ice hockey is a game full of players losing it. But there's one particular rivalry that really takes things to extremes.
You come and see Sheffield versus Nottingham, and everything I've said, multiply it by 300, and you might be getting somewhere close to the atmosphere.
I think the rivalry between our two clubs began when Sheffield were formed, and that was back in 1990-91, and we played a couple of years in the lower leagues, and then we finally made it into the Premier League. We were a pretty good team, and we had some pretty good players, and we started winning a lot of games. And with that came some animosity from the larger, more established clubs. And then, of course, with that came our response, and our response was to really make sure this rivalry with Nottingham meant something.
Both these clubs emerged from very different backgrounds and have never seen eye to eye.
Nottingham have always claimed they held the moral ground. They've been around since the early 30s, and they were the old established club. And here was little Johnny, new kid on the block, wet nose, you know, here was the Sheffield Steelers.
They came in with a rah-rah-rah razzmatazz approach at a time when we played in an old building where we had an organist, and we had a lot of older fans that had been brought up on ice hockey in the 50s and the 60s and what have you. So the new boys on the block came in with their dancing girls and their razzmatazz and their pop music, and the rivalry just continued to grow. And in fact, I don't think you can understate the rivalry between Nottingham and Sheffield.
It's become the biggest rivalry in our sport by none. There's nothing that's close to a Sheffield-Nottingham game, and it boils over because it means so much to the supporters. It's not WWF. This is for real. These teams don't like one another. The fans don't like one another. The clubs don't like one another. Management put up with one another. Not best of buddies. We wouldn't go on holiday together.
In all honesty, if we beat the Sheffield Steelers every game in a season and lost to everybody else, we'd probably think that was a good year.
I can't sleep a night before a Steelers Panthers game because I know it's going to just be the juices flowing when you get to the game. It's that important.
The best feeling in the world is to be the manager of the Nottingham Panthers when you've just beaten Sheffield 5-0 and you've won a couple of fights along the way. That is the best feeling in the world, and that's probably why you stick at it and do the job.
It might look like a free-for-all, but unbelievably, when the gloves do come off, most players follow a certain etiquette.
You normally find that when the teammates, when a fight breaks out, the teammates will support their teammates, and what they will do is make sure that no other of the Panthers players join in the fight. You let the two guys fight, and your job then as a secondary player is to ensure that the other players don't get involved in the fights. If you look at who's fighting who, they've actually all found guys of roughly their same stature. You find your own kind of weight division. If, for example, though, their biggest player, the Panthers' biggest player, picks on our smallest player, then it's the job of our big tough players to go and stop that fight and say to the big Panthers player, hey, if you want to fight somebody, you fight me, not the little boy.
If one of the Panthers and one of the Steelers, you know, start something, the other players will just pair off just to make sure that a guy doesn't get outnumbered. It only ever escalates if two guys are having a go at one guy and then someone goes in to balance the books, you know. We're all good accountants in ice hockey.
Sure enough, when these arch rivals met in 2001, all etiquette was set aside and the benches cleared for a match-stopping, all-in brawl.
Our players decided at that time, under the order of the coach, that it was time to go, and it was time for the Steelers to make their mark and to say to the Nottingham Panthers that you can't bully the Sheffield Steelers. This was the time for us to, OK, break a few rules, but this was the time for us to go into their building and win a battle and win a war, and that's what we did.
There's been bad blood between these two sides for a number of years now, but nothing as bad as this. All hell broke loose 5 minutes into the second period as both sides cleared their benches for an all-out war.
When a team sends all the guys onto the ice, you can't be outnumbered 22-5. You've got to balance the books.
The game was held up for 45 minutes to cool the players down, and the main culprits were thrown out.
After the bench clearance, our reaction to the team was, way to go, guys, way to look after each other, way to stick together. The fans, I've got to say, they seem to enjoy it. I didn't see anybody running for the exits. You know, poor me. I had to write letters to the disciplinary chiefs for about 3 weeks afterwards. You know, everyone forgets about that side of it.
But come on, fellas. Surely once your players have stopped fighting each other, the pair of you can forgive and forget, can't you?
They've got a mouthpiece in Dave Sims, and I underline the word mouth when I say mouthpiece, and he likes to bicycle pump everything, and he goes over the top, and we sit back and let him do that.
He bleeds black and gold. I bleed teal and orange. I'm a Steeler. He's a Panther. Our clubs clash. Our clubs cross.
And all he does is he inflames the passions of both sets of fans. And we've got to the stage now in our rivalry where you don't get spectators at Panthers-Sheffield games, you get witnesses.
I don't want to finish a game and walk down the corridor and shake Gary's hand and him have a smile from ear to ear. There's nothing worse than looking at that sight.
I'm sure he's a lovely bloke away from ice hockey. And there are fairies at the bottom of my garden and pigs can fly.
We haven't come to blows yet. There's been a couple of times we've got close, but we haven't come to blows yet. We leave that to the players. It's a bit better that way.